Futures Radio Show, sponsored by CME Group, the world's leading and most diverse futures and options exchange. CME Group's markets help individuals and businesses around the world effectively manage risk. For access to free educational tools and resources for the active individual trader, please visit activetrader.cmegroup.com.
Every day, traders and investors dive in to tackle the ever-changing markets to find opportunity. Futures Radio Show is your number one source for answers to the questions that all market participants want to ask. Veteran futures trader Anthony Crudele sits down with the most influential leaders and top traders in the industry. Now, here's your host, Anthony Crudele.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in for this episode with Coach Dana Cavalea. Remember, new shows are posted on Mondays and Thursdays. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes and YouTube. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a review on iTunes. Before I play today's interview for you, I want to give a shout out to the great sponsors of Futures Radio Show: CME Group, Trading Technologies, RJO Futures, and Top Step Trader. To learn more about these sponsors and the important things they are doing for futures traders, be sure to click on their logos on our website. Today I spoke with high performance coach Dana Cavalea. We kicked off today's conversation by talking about his journey in becoming the performance coach for the New York Yankees. We discussed how talent alone isn't good enough for long-term success. You also need to have good day-to-day fundamental habits. Coach shares with us some of the common problems that traders he works with face. And we discussed how many traders suffer from anxiety and ways they can go about helping with their anxiety or even preventing it. Last but not least, we chatted about finding balance and replacing bad habits with good habits. So without further ado, let me take you right to the interview with Coach Dana. Coach Dana, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here today. And you're the former director of strength and conditioning and performance for the New York Yankees. You were part of that World Championship team in 2009. I feel like it was yesterday. I was watching that team. It was a great team. Also in that year, you were awarded the Nolan Ryan Award. And really just obviously an awesome year for you. And I'm really curious about your background. I mean, how did you get started as a performance coach and then start working with the Yankees?
Yeah, well, my background, I always say a lot of times guys that become coaches were guys that required a lot of coaching as players. So I started as a baseball player myself, played in college, and going through my process, I realized that I was short as a player in so many different areas, and I leaned on coaches so much to try to help me really, I always say, wring out the sponge and try to get as much out of my talent set as I could. Now, I did get to a point, I went to the University of South Florida down in Tampa, and I got to a point where I realized that my talent ceiling, I had gotten there. I reached it, and that ceiling wasn't going to be enough to get me to my ultimate dream, which was to be a player on the New York Yankees. So I had a pivot. I had a set my new targets, and something I always enjoyed doing, believe it or not, was training to be an athlete. I enjoyed the training process. Again, anything I could do that would where I put my efforts in and I was able to get a return on my efforts, I was always very attracted to, which I think is what led me to become a performance coach. But my story was simple. My parents are both teachers, grew up in New York. I really got sick of the cold weather, decided to go down to Florida, Tampa, University of South Florida, and I got a degree in sports medicine. And my journey with the Yankees started very simply. I went up to the field one day as a fan, and I'm taking pictures through a chain link fence of all these players. Derek Jeter, Roger Clemens, Andy Pettitte, Mariano Rivera. And at the same time, I was interning with the football team over at my school. And right after that day of taking my pictures through my chain link fence, I drive back to my school. I meet with the head strength coach there, and he says, Dana, I got to run something by you. I got a call today from the head strength coach with the Yankees, and he wanted to know if I had anybody that would be interested in basically handing out towels, handing out water, and cleaning the weight room. Would you have any interest in that? And I said, you know what? As a matter of fact, I just got back from there, and I'm very, very interested. So literally the next day, I show back up at the field. This time I have a parking spot. I pull in. They throw a credential around my neck that said clubhouse access, and throw me in some Yankee gear. And next thing you know, 5 minutes later, that same field I was taking pictures of a day earlier, I was in the middle of with all of these iconic players that I looked up to as a kid. And here I was now, and in that moment, my life had forever changed. So it was a pretty unbelievable 24 hours. And I always say, power of choice. You know, I made a couple choices that led me to that point, and I basically set myself up going forward. Now, it wasn't easy. I was 19 years old at the time. I really didn't know much of anything, and but I knew that if you put yourself in a good position, you can ultimately achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. And that's where my journey started. I didn't have any connections, didn't have any hooks. Like I said, my parents were school teachers by day, and had no connections. So I had to bulldog my way in. So it worked out really well.
Man, I love that story. What an awesome story. And one thing that really triggered with me was something that you said. You talked about how the journey, and you love the journey to becoming an athlete, what you had to go through. And us as traders, we talk about the grind. And I tell traders all the time, look, at the grind is always going to be there, so you better start embracing it. Is that kind of how you felt too? Like you embraced the journey, you enjoyed every little aspect of it, of getting better all the time and just embracing the grind?
You know what? I did embrace it, but it wasn't a pleasurable journey, to tell you the truth. My whole life, up until just maybe, I don't know, 7 years ago, I felt like I was always being chased by lions. And I had to always be something bigger than I was. Or I was 19. I felt like when I was 19, I had to act like I was 30. When I was 25, I felt like I had to act like when I was 35. I always felt like I had to act as if I had my shit together, even when I didn't. And it became somewhat of, it was a battle every day. It was the battle. And listen, there was glory during the battle. Achieving the things that I got to achieve, and being around the guys I got to be around, and the environments, and just, it was amazing. But when you're going through it, sometimes you don't realize what you're actually involved with and what you're actually doing and the magnitude and all that. But I felt pressure every day. I always said there wasn't a day that I felt really comfortable. And I had a sign in my office, and it's still there today at Yankee Stadium. It says, "Get comfortable with the uncomfortable." And I feel like I lived in that state. Now, if I had to do it all over again, I would have tried to get out of that state as fast as possible, and realize that, hey, you don't have to feel like that. You could still chase greatness and do incredible things without that lion, feeling like that lion's chasing you. But ultimately, that was my state. I was hard charging. I was going after it with the same tenacity I had as an athlete. I was there as a coach, and I wanted to be there for everybody, and I wanted to, just be an unbelievable asset to my organization.
Traders listening, I mean, I know how much this is resonating with me and my journey, and exactly like you said, Coach, it's being comfortable, being uncomfortable, right? And what I'm curious about is, how much of the Yankees' success was raw baseball talent versus, building a good mindset, building good habits as players and also as people?
Yeah. Well, listen, I can't lie and say that the players, that the talent level was not, much higher than, the talent level of these players just naturally. Again, you're talking about guys that are hand-selected as the best in the world, the top 1%. So the talent level was very high. But that's the same for guys that are working for big organizations, traders and anybody that's having big-time success. The talent is there. But talent, if you don't take talent and combine that with good, solid habits, day-to-day habits, nothing crazy, but just good day-to-day fundamentals. It's amazing how that talent that you lean on could actually be the same thing that takes you down. We've seen it for years, guys that come in with great talent. They're supposed to be the next best thing, the greatest thing since so-and-so. And they come on the scene, they make a big splash, and 3 years later, they're out of the game. Well, what happened? Well, a lot of just taking it for granted, a lot of hype that was built up around them, and they believed it, and a lack of good, solid, fundamental, day-to-day habits that lead you to long-term success. Because we all want to play, we want to win the short game, but ultimately the real success and the real wealth generation and the real legacy is built in the long game. And what I got to see in a player like Derek Jeter was it was all about just consistent day-to-day performance. And a guy like him, he used his habits and his routines, which again, you'd watch Derek Jeter's habits and routines, and you'd say, that's it? And they were so simple. And he just did them every single day, never missed. And that's what led to the success. So you got to have talent, and you got to have good day-to-day habits, and that leads to consistent performances. And most importantly, consistent performances where you're not doubting or questioning yourself. And every day you execute on that routine, it's money in the bank, and that compounds, and you gain more and more sustainability, more and more strength, and more self-belief, which ultimately makes you unshakable.
Hearing you talk about Derek Jeter and how simple his process was, but how consistent he was on a day in, day out basis practicing it, one of the most popular questions I get is, Anthony, how do you become a consistent trader? And the answer is the same for me every single time. It starts with a consistent process. And hearing you, Coach, talk about probably the greatest baseball player of my generation, talk about how simple his process was, but how consistent he was with it. I think for traders, it helps us in the moment when the pressure all of a sudden is on you. You're so used to doing something consistent that you become really good at dealing with pressure because you've practiced it in your mind. You're prepared for those moments, and that helps you become a better executor of your strategy.
Right. And that's what it is. I mean, the fastest way to disrupt a high-level player is to disrupt their routine. If you, like a guy like Derek Jeter, if he knew there was a storm coming in, coming in from the Midwest, I mean, his every locker at the stadium had a computer screen. Some guys would have social media up, other guys would have, different websites. He'd always have the weather up. He'd always be tracking weather because he knew that was the one thing that could disrupt his preparation for that day. And if you disrupted the preparation and the routine, even down to the minute, you would have disrupted his potential results for that day, or potential success for that day, or the success rather that he was planning on having for that day. So he wanted to get on top of the variables that could disrupt routine because he knew routine and habits led to success. Now, some days you get beat, and that's the other thing. And I've talked to players about this a lot. Mariano Rivera told me this a couple weeks ago. I was at his house. We were just chatting. And he said, Dana, he goes, you need to teach the people you coach how to fail. Because if they don't know how to fail, they may fail and get knocked out of the game. He goes, you got to fail and get back in the game. And you got to know that failing is just a part of any process, in which when you're chasing success of any kind, you're going to fail. But the most important thing you could do is get back in the game and don't use the emotions that came with that failure to take you down and affect future performances.
Man, so many things similar to trading with athletes. And having you on the show today, we've talked a lot about your past and how you've worked with the Yankees. And now these days you're working not only with athletes, but with traders. Talk to us about what you're doing these days.
Yeah, so I have this interesting niche. I mean, being in the Greenwich, Connecticut, New York City area, I just in my day-to-day endeavors, through the years, it's like I'd come across guys and they'd say, "Hey, what do you do?" I said, "Hey, I train the best athletes in the world." And, they saw themselves, again, guys that are, running some of these hedge funds and private equity traders, they see themselves as competitors. And again, they got to show up every day and get it done, and not let the market kick their ass too hard. So I came across some guys and they said, "Hey, would you train me? Would you have any interest in working with me, coaching me?" And, I started very simply. I picked up 1, I picked up 2, I picked up 3, I picked up 4. And I started to realize the similarities between athletes and traders, athletes and guys in the finance industry. And I said, this is a pretty cool little niche because I love working with athletes. That's my passion. And I realized that these guys saw themselves as athletes. They compete much like athletes, which means they have a lot of the same problems that they face that athletes have. And I was able to create this great niche of coaching. I coach them physically. I coach them mentally. We talk about, business. We talk about all of it. So it's a comprehensive coaching model. That's what I focus on now. And it's not just a therapy session where it's, a typical business coach is going to go about it that way. I'm looking at the whole picture, much like we talked about some of the issues that you faced as a young man in your career physically and how that stress led to, a breakdown. I want to prevent that for people. So that's what I spent a lot of time doing. How do we get you aligned to your mission, vision, and goal? How do we, keep your conviction high without being influenced by external factors? And then how do we keep you on task, on routine, on plan without you doubting yourself and not letting any, again, externals affect your internal decisions and internal world?
I love that you're doing this, Coach. I know I told you, and the cat's out of the bag. Everybody knows that I've had a heart attack. I was 36 years old when I had one, and the things I've had to put into place in my life to help me now deal with that wake-up call.
Yeah.
And having guys like you in our industry, man, I can't tell you how excited I am about it. And what I'm curious about is, what are you noticing as a common problem that the traders you are working with have?
I'll use the word pressure, right? Pressure. I notice they have a problem with pressure. And a lot of times they'll say, it's because of the market, it's because of how things are trending, it's because of this, it's because of that. But ultimately, it's because of you. And so many of us, I say us because I feel like I'm a high performer as well. Or anybody that's chasing results, right? And is expecting greatness out of themselves can suffer from this pressure problem. Now, we put the pressure on ourselves, and we've come up with timelines. We've created expectations for ourselves. And when you combine what we've created for ourselves and then combine that with the external expectations, whether, our boss may have, or, that's what creates a level of pressure where the body can't handle it. And eventually there's a breakdown, and it happens mentally. You could have panic attacks, you could have just chronic anxiety, or you can get to the point where your body systematically begins to shut down. And your heart attack, again, I don't know your whole health history leading up to it, but I will say this. Your body probably said, "Hey, I've had enough, and we're going to stop now." And what did it do? It allowed you a chance to reset. And one of my chapters in my book is sometimes you got to slow down to speed up. And I see so many guys in finance, they're racing the clock, racing it, whether it's to reach a certain status, financial level, whatever it may be. But it's also, we got to teach them to trust, and trust their guts, trust their instincts, trust that they're on the right path. And putting, again, routines and habits in place that show them, hey, if you do this process every day, you will have success. But you got to trust your process. And when you trust your process, you're less affected by externals. Does it make sense?
Coach, I can't tell you how much it makes sense to me. And you led off by saying the common problem that they have was pressure. And I go back in my career, and the amount of pressure I put on myself, right? It wasn't somebody putting the pressure on me. It was me putting the pressure on myself. And over the last 5 years after my heart attack, I really was able to realize how much pressure that I was creating on myself that was unnecessary. And you talked about how some of these people are having anxiety. I suffered from anxiety for many years. As a 21-year-old kid starting to trade, that was something that I was struggling with for years. And I really never sought help for it because I just figured I'm a young guy. I wasn't passing out, literally passing out, but I would feel like I was going to. And it was never happening, Coach, when I was trading. It was always happening when I was not trading. It was happening in the moments when I'd just be totally relaxed.
Yeah.
Why do you think that was? I'm just curious.
Well, listen, I think we're on a great path here, and I love that we're talking about this because I'm gonna say this. We're gonna go back to what you just said, but ultimately, I find a lot of the guys that I work with that have hundreds of millions of dollars, right? They're just overcompensating, right? There's a fundamental lack of belief and a fear of failure that's at the roots of a lot of what they're dealing with, and they think that the more they earn, the more they grow, the more power that they gain is going to make up for some of those fundamental root foundational weaknesses that they have, and it won't. So when we go back and we start to address the roots of things and we patch all that up and we clean all that up, their earning power goes through the roof, and they're doing it in a much, much different way. And that's when I hear a guy that's a young hustler trying to get to the top and build and build and build, you got to step back and figure out why are you feeling that pressure? Where's it coming from? What's leading to it? And when we figure that out, I let them know, listen, you know that pressure you're putting on yourself and that psychosis that you're experiencing? Like, you're putting that on yourself, but that's not going to be the reason why you have success. It's ultimately going to be the reason why you fail. So let's realize that the pressure we put on ourselves is not what is going to lead to our success. It'll ultimately lead to failure. It's, again, going back and finding the trust in yourself, trust in your intellect, trust in your gut, your instincts. That's what's going to lead you to success. And if you could get that to all work, that works better without the pressure. Pressure, it clouds your mind. It negatively affects you so much more than positively affecting you. And when you said before, hey, I feel that anxiety, I feel that stress when I'm not trading, you are conditioning yourself to trade all the time, thinking trading, that space. You don't even know how to live in that space anymore. So your body says, not trading. Oh my God, what do I do? And you get this adrenal response and you're in this fight or flight mode when you're supposed to be relaxing and recharging your batteries. So what happens is you are releasing cortisol. You're releasing these fight or flight hormones all day long. And your body feels like, again, it's being chased by a lion 24 hours a day and never recovering. That system is never recovering. And when you don't recover that system, it will break down.
So, Coach, a couple of things I want to talk to you about in my experience, the things that when I look back are issues that I had. And the fear of failure to me was something that really hurt me because that's one of the reasons I put so much pressure on myself to perform, was because I was scared that if I wasn't successful at this, if this was not going to be what I was going to be able to do for the rest of my life as a career, that I started to fear that like I would have an identity crisis. Like, okay, look in the mirror. What else am I going to do? This is who I am. This is what I want to do. I love it. I'm putting all the time in, but I'm not making money. Right. So that was a big pressure point for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This reminds me of, years ago, I was talking with Roger Clemens on the field one day and he goes, D, I want to tell you something. He goes, being a baseball player, it's what I do, but it's definitely not who I am. And he said that way, he says, so whatever happens out there, he goes, it doesn't affect who I am. It never affects Roger Clemens, the person. It's more Roger Clemens, the baseball player. He's like, so that was an important lesson. And, one thing I want to say too is, a lot of guys in finance, are pretty educated guys. They go to these big time schools, Ivy League. So there's a certain status that they feel that they need to live up to as well. So all of that plays into, again, that feeling of I got to be perfect. This has to work out. A lot of people are banking on me. I represent not only myself, my family, and the school that I went to. It's all of that stuff together that usually leads to some of the things that we're talking about.
What are some of the basic essentials you believe a trader has to have set in their life as a person and also as a trader to help them deal with this pressure and help them get on the right path for success?
Yeah, so I say you got to have a couple key components, and there's a lot of talk about these morning routines. People talk a lot about morning routines, and I talk about them too. But I say, you got to have a good starting point to your day that you're not compromising. And it should involve, hydrating your system, fueling your system, and then it has to address the overall, muscular system and cardiovascular system. So I like to have everybody start their day with proper fueling, proper hydration, and a good stretching and activation routine. That's how I get all my guys that I coach to start their day. And that's where we start. We begin right there. Because again, much like an athlete, you got to get your system ready. You got to get your mindset ready. You got to be ready to go. And that's where I start with all my guys. And I say the reason I do that is because you got to put yourself first. A lot of your day, you may feel like you're reacting to different things. But if we could put one pillar in the ground, and we start here with your own health and wellness, we've made our priority that, which is us and our own health. So we prioritize our health first, then we go to battle for the day. And then when you get home from your day of battle, I create what I call a transition routine where you say, hey, battle's ended. Now I get to start my personal life again. So we do a transition. And that's based on, I got one guy that's a musician. He's a drummer. So when he gets home, he changes out of his suit and tie, puts on his chill clothes, and he goes and drums for about 20 to 30 minutes. And that's his segue between work and personal. And then again, because the day, especially as a trader, you're charged up, you're in kill mode, you're playing that offense. And then we put together a nice pre-bed routine, which for our guys, some guys, they do hot baths and things like that. Same thing we do with our athletes. We're downshifting the nervous system. So in the morning, we turn you on, but as soon as that day ends, boom, we turn you off and we downshift you to where you could rest and recover and quiet your mind. Now, when I talk about training and exercise, again, the typical, Wall Street mentality is, go hard. I should always be going hard, push, push, push. That's the mentality. So but I also teach guys, you got to know what's going on in your body. When you feel that pressure, when you feel that stress, the worst thing you could do is an aggressive, like boot camp, high intensity workout, because your body's already overly excited. You should be pulling it back down. On days you feel great, you can go for it. But days when you're charged up and your body's feeling that pressure and that squeeze and you just feel that like I can't come down, the worst thing you could do is go train hard. The best thing you can do is, steam, sauna, massage, something like that. So when I build routines, it's totally custom based on the player involved. Again, my job was to oversee $300+ million in human capital, and I needed to make sure that capital was deployed when it was deployed every day, that it was ready to play. Every day it wasn't on the field was very, very costly to the organization that I represented in the Yankees. So I approach everybody as an individual. My morning routine and your morning routine may be totally different. My transition, your transition, different. Night routine, different. But I put those in place, those three pillars, morning, transition, and night, because those are the three grounding foundational steps that I believe need to be in place for you to have long-term sustainability.
Coach, I can't tell you how much I agree with you just through my own experience with me learning about myself and my body. When I was talking with my doctor after my heart attack, he was asking me the things that I do on a regular basis. I'm like, I work out, I do this, I do that. And I was doing a lot of what people would consider the right things, right? And what I was not aware of was exactly what you said. Work hard all day, stress, and then go and then just do bench presses and hard workouts. And all that was doing was constricting my body. I didn't have that moment of meditation or yoga or something to balance out that pressure I was putting on myself all day. And over the last several years, I have learned to find that balance. How am I feeling today? And, and hearing you talk about that, Coach, it's exactly what I've learned to do for myself, because obviously I've put myself in a position where I had to figure this out because of the heart attack. But for everybody out there that was just listening to you talk about that, talk to us about, I hate the word tips, but I think what I'm trying to get at is, how can you help someone identify a day to where they should go do something else? How do you help a player or a trader start finding that balance that works for them?
Yeah, well, the biggest question that I always ask, anybody I work with, again, whether you're an athlete or a trader or CEO, is, hey, how do you feel? And what I'm amazed at is how many people cannot verbalize how it is that they feel, which means that there's a major disconnection between their mind and their body. They don't even know what the feeling of the different feelings that the body can have, right? So you can't really prescribe anything fully until you can get them to understand that and be able to verbalize how you feel. And I start that through a series of questions, hey, are you tired? How's your energy? Hey, when you sleep at night, do you dream or not? Do you grind your teeth at night or not? So in order for them to get to a point where they can verbalize, I may have to ask a series of questions, right? And then I could help them verbalize. And then eventually, when they start to gain more of that awareness as to actually what's going on, then you can really help them the most with a positive prescription, for them. So everybody's different. So I have such a hard time saying, hey, here's 5 things that you should do. I don't approach my practice like a Men's Health article, like 5 tips to lean out, 5 tips for the greatest life of you could ever have, 5 tips for a trader to shine, because it's so individualized. And again, we got to get each person to understand what's going on with themselves physically, what's going on, like what are the actual thoughts that they have. I always say your thoughts are just patterns. And typically you could tell yourself a thought or a pattern of thoughts for weeks and months at a time, and you may not even realize it, that negative thinking or that sort of thinking is leading you to this sort of physical decay that may be having. So we work through all that. And in doing that, we start to create these goalposts and what it is that we should be doing, and that's how I work to help people. But you got to know what's going on. Again, I live just outside of Greenwich, Connecticut, and I see it. When these guys are going to lunch every day, it's like they're programmed. It's like get up in the morning, someone puts a code in their back, and they go, and they don't stop. They don't know how to stop. And I try to help them stop for a minute, but not to pull them back and help them, be lazy. I help them to see themselves from a 40,000, foot view. And then we go and figure out how to become even better than we are in a different way with more awareness. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. And what really resonated with me with what you just said is something that I really didn't do for 15 years. Was basically verbalize the way I was feeling. It seems so easy, but how are you feeling today? Just talking to yourself. I am stressed out. What can I do? And I think that letting that emotion come to the surface and then just getting it off your chest, that will allow you. I think that's a great first step for someone to know what exercise they should be doing next. Like if you're coming off of a hard day and then you go have an espresso and then you go and work out, how's it helping you?
Yeah, and then think about the routine of a lot of traders. They're powered by espresso, cigarettes, everything to kind of get them up, 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 up.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you're up. Now you got to eventually get down. How are you going to get down? And listen, the takeaway that I would love everybody to have from this show, because I really think it can save lives, is if you have stress and you have anxiety, don't just look to bury it and suppress it and figure out ways that you could, maybe hide from it. Dude, if you don't address this, I'm telling you, you will pay for it. So if you're somebody listening to this show and you have, stress and anxiety, and it's not something where it's just in a moment and then it disappears and it doesn't come back for a month or a week or a couple weeks. If you're someone that deals with this stuff on a chronic basis, you must address it. And if you don't, I'm telling you, the results will not be what you're looking for.
I'm the perfect example of it, Coach. Look at me, 15 years, suppressing everything in. I'm very fortunate, lucky, blessed to have survived my heart attack, and everything now I'm devoting in my everyday life, like you talked about, my mornings, everything to me is every step I make in my day is important, and recognizing how I feel. And, I say this a lot to myself, mind and body, right? If you want to be able to perform, I've got to be right in my body. I've got to be right in my mind. And then I can go out and do what it is I want to do.
That's the base. That's the foundation. And it's somewhat crazy, right? That we have to talk about this, but it shows you just how far gone so many people are, and so many of us are or were, in that, we can take ourselves to a place where we're running literally an Ironman or an ultra marathon every single day. We're out there.
Yep.
And we don't realize it. And the body says, hey man, you better slow down. And the other thing that I do with those that I work with is, I do what you can call life coaching, performance coaching, but I give these traders and these guys support that they don't have. I let them know, hey, this is okay. It's okay, man. It's okay. I'm a guy's guy. You can pull back a little bit, and I'm telling you, you're still going to have the success. And so many of us we need someone in our corner, right? We need to know that we're not just doing this thing alone. And so many of us go to work every day. We're grinding it out. We're on our own. And I would vouch to say that most of the guys that I work with, and again, I work with primarily males, they feel good that there's somebody there with them now. And that's what I want people to feel. It's like, dude, you don't have to go about this thing alone. You could have someone to work with you on this. And it's important that you get this stuff off your chest. And that CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is an important part of all this. Expression, talking about what you're feeling and getting it out there, and then attacking a plan to make sure that you're staying on top of all that. Huge, 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 huge stuff, if you want to make it in the long run.
In complete agreement with you, Coach. And now for a trader listening right now that is struggling with bad habits, I've had bad habits that I began at the beginning of my career, and over the course of my career, they're very hard to get rid of. They're contagious. And yeah. I've always found that I've had to put good habits in place to get rid of them. And even some of the ones that I put in, some of my bad habits at the beginning of my career, they still haunt me a little bit. I do pretty good at keeping them away majority of the time, but they still haunt me sometimes.
Yeah.
What's the first step you suggest to a trader to start getting rid of those bad habits and implementing good ones?
I say, first you got to know bad habits are like weeds. They just keep going and they lead to more bad habits. So, but ultimately, a good habit can wipe out a bad habit. So what I do when I work with guys is, listen, right now you are who you are what you are. We can't just go in and dig out every weed and every bad habit day one. Figure out what's the elephant in the room. What's the biggest thing that if you were to improve this, it would wipe out maybe 5 bad habits or 3 bad habits or 2 bad habits. So I start by adding, if you add positive is great weed killer, and it could wipe out some negatives that you have. So what I do is I take a snapshot of a guy's day. We take a look at it. We start to understand, hey, what are the negative habits? Let's lay them out. And if we could correct and add one positive, we can change the outcome of some of those other negatives. So again, I know there's all sorts of different bad habits, but we got to identify what are our bad habits and what's maybe the one that's sabotaging our overall performance. Like, what's the elephant in the room of the negative habits that we have? And then is there a positive that we can put in place to wipe out that one elephant in the room negative? And if we do that, it'll correct a lot of the others. Does that make sense? So we're not technically replacing. We're saying we're identifying, and then we're adding a positive. And in adding that positive will indirectly wipe out that big elephant in the room or that negative. So I know it's a little conceptual because we're not using actual examples, but if we identify this is the big thing, let's put something positive that'll take out the big thing. That big thing will then correct maybe 2 or 3, 4 negatives that are attached to it. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. I love it, Coach. Great stuff. I want to talk about your book before we get into rapid fire questions. So talk to us about your book.
Yeah, so I wrote a book, Habits of a Champion. Nobody becomes a champion by accident. And I had no intention of being an author. I really did. I'm a coach. That's what I do. That's what I love. But I got so sick of reading these books about success and personal development and personal growth. And I said, man, all of these books that I'm reading are based primarily on classroom, on theory. I'm going to create a book. I'm going to write a book that's based on real life examples that shows you, hey, listen, the best in the world, yeah, they get their butts kicked too. And there is no one formula, for success. So I wrote this book with the intent of really helping people in the way that we're talking about today, and helping people to again know that some of the thoughts that they have on a day-to-day basis, yeah, other people have those self-defeating thoughts as well. Other people are questioning themselves, even though they're in high-level positions. You're not alone. So that's really what my book is about, and that there are certain habits and there's certain day-to-day thoughts that either lead you closer to success or take you further away. But ultimately, I wanted to write a book that is used, that people could use as a handbook, that they could pick up any chapter, any page, any day, and reference something as a pick-me-up to kind of correct the way that they may be thinking about themselves or about something. And that I used examples of players, again, like Mariano Rivera, some of the, again, finance guys that I work with. One guy I work with is with Guggenheim, and he told me, hey, when I was a kid, I used to move from city to city, and the first thing I did when I got to the new school was I punched the bully in the face. And he said, because that basically set the tone, like, hey, nobody's going to come take advantage of me. But I wrote about it in the book in a way that said, we all have bullies in our life, and it's important that we face them and punch them in the face head on, because oftentimes those bullies are fear. So it's I took some spins and just related it to people's day to day. That was really important for me. So that's what my book is about, and it was a joy to write. It was a grind, but that was one of the joyful grinds, because I know it's helped a lot of people.
It's a must read, everybody. Go out and get Coach's book. Coach, we got rapid fire segment questions next if you're ready for those.
All right, I'm ready. I'm going to take a deep breath, and I'm ready for you.
All right, everybody. Our rapid fire segment is sponsored by Trading Technologies. Access the global markets from virtually anywhere with TT. They are the world's fastest commercially available futures trading platform. And now you can trade cryptocurrency spot and derivative markets side by side. For more information, please visit tradingtechnologies.com. Coach, who has influenced your life the most and why?
Well, I have to say my parents. I can't just say my dad. I can't just say my mom. They were very. They both contributed in so many different ways. So I will start there. Definitely my parents. My mom was a hustler, go getter, chase it. The worst somebody could tell you is no. and my dad was more on the reasonable, rational side, and definitely a big supporter. So,
What was one of the hardest things that you've had to overcome in coaching?
man, in coaching, well, the biggest thing is actually was coaching myself. I had opened a series of gyms that I was looking to create a franchise, and I built out the infrastructure, and I realized 5 gyms in that I hated it. And I had to coach myself to say, hey, even though you committed to this financially, and if your heart's not in it, I had to coach myself out of it, selling and closing. So that was my hardest coaching moment. It was on myself.
How has your coaching process evolved over the years?
Well, I prioritized the individual a lot more, and I got away from just saying, well, this is what the science says, this is what the data says, and I started to focus a lot more on the person and what the person says.
What is one attribute that you believe every athlete or trader should have?
Self-belief.
Favorite book you've read lately?
Well, I keep a book on my desk, and it's John Wooden. John Wooden, the book is titled Coach Wooden's Pyramid of Success. Just great lessons that come from a good place.
What's your favorite sports movie?
Sports movie. I got to go with Rudy.
What's the best advice that you've received about coaching?
The best advice that I've received on coaching, again, would be to approach everybody like an individual, and I learned that from Joe Torre.
If you could go back in time and give the younger you a piece of advice, what would it be?
No pressure.
If you had an elevator pitch me your edge in coaching, what would it be?
The edge would be people first. I put the people first. That's it.
Last question for today, Coach. What's your favorite thing to do when you're not working?
When I'm not working, I'm a big fan of horse racing. I love watching horses train, and watching horses compete. So that's my thing.
Coach, where can people find you on social media, preferably Twitter? Give us a website to check out and somewhere specifically you'd like people to go and get the book.
Sure. So my Twitter handle is Dana Cavalea. My website is danacavalea.com. And anybody that, I do coaching sessions there, you can check that out. And for the book, Amazon, easiest place to find it. I'm very available.
Coach, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your schedule to speak with me today on Futures Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Futures Radio Show. If you have any questions or comments for myself or my guests, please visit futuresradioshow.com and sign up to be a premium member for free. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes.